Welcome to Casual Politics, Lord Douglas Hurd. Thank you very much for accepting my request, and I'm very grateful to you. You need no introduction. You were Minister for Europe from 1979 to 1983. You were Secretary of State for Northern Ireland from 1984 to 1985. You were the Home Secretary from 1985 to 1989, and then Finance Secretary from 1989 following until 1995, following your resignation. So my first question is, how did you get involved in politics?
It's partly hereditary. My grandfather was a Member of Parliament, my father was a Member of Parliament, my son is a Member of Parliament. So there's a certain line.
Yes.
And I was interested in it all my life. But my father, who was quite a wise man, said, don't think you can go straight into politics from university, from Cambridge, because no one will be particularly interested in you. So go and earn a living in some other field, and then bring that experience back to bear on politics. I think this was good advice. I took that advice, and I spent 14 years as a professional diplomat in the Foreign Service. And then at the age of 36, I thought, well, if I'm going to plunge, I should plunge now.
Yes.
Because life is passing by, and so I did, and I had a job with Ted Heath, running his political office, and then eventually I got a constituency, and so gradually I climbed the ladder. Took a long time.
Took a long time, but finally you did it. And your education at Eton and then Oxford, did it make it easier for you to enter into politics?
No, I think it made no particular difference. On the one hand, it gave me experience. I learned to make speeches. I learned to speak in public and not be afraid of that. And it's amazing, I find, in England how many people are without that experience. And simply get into a panic if they are asked to say even a few words at some occasion. So I have that. On the other hand, there's now, and was even then, a certain prejudice against public schools, what we call public schools, and particularly against Eton. It's a prejudice which actually evaporates. It doesn't make much sense, because obviously Eton does provide a first-class education, and that can't seriously be denied. But nevertheless, now, I think my son, for example, who was also at Eton, found it, on the whole, a handicap, because the moment you say, I was at Eton, it conveys a picture of an exclusive aristocratic elite. Yeah. And that picture is not true, but it's persistent.
It's persistent. And you mentioned Edward Heath's name. You were his parliamentary private secretary.
No, I was actually, the technical term is I was his political secretary.
Yes.
I was not a Member of Parliament then,
yes.
But I ran that part of his life in which he performed as leader of the Conservative Party. So, for example, we have every year a party conference, at which the leader's speech is the key event. Yeah. Someone has to sit down and write it, and then one has to persuade Ted Heath that this is what he wants to say. But also, each weekend he would visit some constituencies, yes. or open some public institution, and so I travelled with him on those occasions. But I didn't do the ordinary business of government, although I kept in close touch with those who did do that as part of his life.
Yeah.
So we worked together. We were a team, that combination worked quite well.
And in your memoir, it seems that it didn't actually you didn't get along very well every time that you worked with Edward Heath. Is that true?
No, it was true, because
yes.
All people knew about me.
Yes.
was that I worked for the Prime Minister, and those who admired the Prime Minister, Ted Heath, thought, well, that's good, so we'll give him a chance. But there were plenty of people who said, who is this young man?
Yes.
Why does he think that he is qualified to come and represent whatever it is? All we know is that he works for the Prime Minister. Well, that isn't sufficient. We need to know something else as well. So it took me several different attempts before I got into became a candidate for a reasonably safe seat.
And Margaret Thatcher, she appointed you first Minister for Europe, and then actually a junior minister at the Home Office and then at the Foreign Office. Do you think that was she right first to appoint you as a junior minister and then as the Secretary of State?
Yes, she pretended. I think this was to some extent a pretense. She pretended that what she was thinking about was my career. Of course, what she was really thinking about was the immediate business of filling a certain number of posts. So I didn't really think that she was spending day after day brooding over my Douglas Hurd's career. That would be absurd. She had other things to think about. But anyway, she did. So she appointed me. It was perfectly logical. I had, first of all, some experience already in the Foreign Office, so it was logical that I should start there, but in a junior position. And then she wanted somebody in Northern Ireland, and because Jim Pryor was leaving that position, and she appointed me, and she was pleased that I accepted, because there were various personal reasons, such as having a small child, that would not been very convenient. But nevertheless, I accepted because it was promotion, and I discussed it with my wife, and so we knew we could do it.
Yes, and then you accepted it.
And I accepted it.
And you remember, it seems that you didn't enjoy your time at the Home Office when you were the junior minister. Why was it?
Well, because I found that the issues in the Home Office in tray, which came to me, were difficult. I did not have a legal training. Many of these issues are legal issues, and they are not immediately easy to understand. And so there I found myself at the age of 40, I suppose, dealing with matters which were outside my range. But I learned quite painfully, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Because I had to learn how to take a bill when there's a government bill before Parliament. There has to be somebody, a minister, who is in charge of that bill and making sure it goes smoothly. And I had a very complicated bill through that process, and I made mistakes, but I learned also from those mistakes. So although it wasn't easy, it was possible.
It was possible. What was your reaction when she called you and said that now I'm going to appoint you as the Secretary of State for the Foreign Secretary? What was your reaction?
Being promoted as Foreign Secretary?
Yes.
Well, it was awkward for her because I think she'd run out of other candidates. I mean, I think she feared that I was a little bit too pro-European, because I'd made no secret of that. And she didn't, on the whole, that wasn't her ideal Foreign Secretary.
Yes.
And she was always afraid I would make too many concessions to the rest of Europe. But she tried all the other options, and that hadn't worked. So she was landed with me. And to do her credit, it was a perfectly good relationship. It worked all right.
Yes.
We had occasional arguments, but we worked together. And I travelled with her, and it was quite a good relationship.
Was it always comfortable to work with a Lady Thatcher?
No, not always comfortable.
Yes.
Because one doesn't go into politics in order to be comfortable. You never knew quite what was going to happen next. You know? She was full of surprises, and you never quite knew until she spoke what. I went with her on her first visit to China, for example, and I didn't know how she would react to that. I knew a bit about China. I'd served there. But I wasn't prepared for the extreme dislike which she had for the Chinese system, the communist system. I understood why she had it, but the strength of that feeling came as a slight surprise. And then I learned how to work with that.
And in your memoir, you say that actually she was overconfident, and then John Major lacked confidence. So do you think this is the reason that backbenchers wanted to get rid of her and then John Major afterwards?
No, there were many different reasons. That may have been one of the her style was sometimes grated against the wishes of her followers. But there were some particular issues. She proposed what we called the poll tax, which is a different system of local taxation, and it became very unpopular, and the opposition exploited that unpopularity, and in the end those who succeeded and those who took her place, eventually John Major, for example, abolished that proposal, withdrew that proposal.
Yes. And replaced it by a council tax.
Yes, that's right.
And before, when the leadership contest in 1990, when she was in Paris, and then when before the first result coming out, did you have in mind that you will present yourself as a candidate?
I had it at the back of my mind because some people whose judgment I respected had said, if there is a vacancy, you should stand. Yeah. So these were friends of mine, and I respected their helpful wish, and so I stood. But it was always going to be difficult, and in the end, I got a certain number of votes. It wasn't disgracefully bad, but it wasn't sufficient.
It wasn't sufficient, and do you think that John Major was it the best? Why Lady Thatcher actually supported John Major and not anyone else?
Well, she didn't understand John Major. He's a very polite person, and he persuaded her, or he allowed her to understand that he was what we call a Thatcherite, that he was a devoted disciple of all her philosophy.
Yes.
He wasn't, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
And I knew that because we were privately in touch. But it came as a shock to her when she discovered this wasn't so. Yes. And she became quite strongly unhelpful to him.
Yes.
Have you talked to him?
Sorry?
Have you talked to John Major?
To John Major, yes. So that's why, and then he called the Eurosceptics bastards in his memoir. And it's, as you said, John Major, but were you a Thatcherite yourself at that time?
No, I wasn't. I had worked for and been loyal to Ted Heath, right?
Yes.
Who was Thatcher's predecessor as leader of the party. And I liked him, I respected him, I knew he was an honest man, doing his best for Britain. And she knew that. Yes. But I think she hoped that I had been loyal to him, and I would be loyal to her in the same sort of way. And I tried to be. I didn't join in any of the attempts to depose her, and I supported her right to the end. Because she'd given me this job, I was doing it the best way I could, and I was grateful.
And to be a pro-European as you were, as a Foreign Secretary, in what ways was challenging to face opposition from the backbenchers?
Well, it was always hard work. I would go to a meeting in Brussels of the Council of Ministers. I would represent Britain at that meeting, and quite often the discussion took a form which went further than my instructions, what I was allowed to say. So I had to, several times I had to telephone the Chancellor of the Exchequer and say, look, we're not going to get away with this, what was it originally in my brief, can I go as far as an extra million or 10 million or whatever the subject matter was. And people understood that. But once or twice it became very difficult for that reason.
Yes.
That there was a growing feeling of being opposite, being opposed to the European Union, and that found its expression in voices and votes in the House of Commons.
And at that time, you were in favour of the single currency and in favour of a referendum. Do you still think that you were right?
The two things are different. I was never actually in favour of a single currency, or not. I wanted to keep that option open. Yes. The talent of John Major was to keep options open, and to get the maximum field for manoeuvre for Britain, and he did that. And I supported that policy. It meant neither saying we must go into the euro at once, nor saying we will never go into the euro, but let's see how things develop. Was my doctrine, and I think it was a sensible one. As it happened, no one now is suggesting we should go into the euro straight away, but that option is open, remains open, and if the whole situation changed, our policy might change.
And to what extent are conservative backbenchers that were damaging to your defeat to the party's defeat in 1997?
No, I don't think they were. John Major had a long run, quite a long run, as Prime Minister, and he won an election which everyone thought we would lose in '92, and he was a good Prime Minister. But all the time, this antagonism to the European Union was increasing inside the Conservative Party, because the EU, its different institutions, showed very little understanding of what the British view was, so gradually the antagonism grew, and now we see it as strong. I hope it will not prove too strong, because I think it would be disastrous if we pulled out of the European Union. I don't think it's very likely that will happen, but obviously when you talk of a referendum, you can talk of a referendum which goes wrong.
And why did you resign in 1995, and did you know that you will be a big loss to your party in order to win the next general election?
Not really. I said to John Major, look, I said to him in '94, I will go on, provided I have your confidence, but there come a time next year in '95 when I will want to retire and do something else, and to write books, for example. And he said quickly, he was a shrewd man, he said, if that's your firm decision, write me a letter now, and say that now in '94 I have decided that in '95 I will retire. So no one then can say this is a crisis, this is a surprise, this is a disaster, because it's there in writing.
Yeah.
And I gave him that letter straight away, and he used it when I retired, to show, well, look, it's no surprise to me. Douglas has said for a long time that he wishes to go in '95, and here is the proof of it. So the date of the letter which I wrote was rather important. It was early, and so we could see there was no surprise. So it didn't. I don't think it affected the election of '97. I didn't contest the seat in '97, and by then I was old news.
Yeah. And when you left politics in 1995, did you miss your time back in frontline politics? Or?
Well, a little bit, but
yes.
Not really. I mean, the
red boxes,
all that.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed all that work, but I'd done enough. I'd had 3 cabinet posts in succession, and the time will come when that is enough, and you may have other things you want to do, and so it's a mistake to hold on too long. I think that Margaret Thatcher made a mistake in hanging on too long, but it's understandable.
And why, since 1997, in your opinion, that your party can't satisfy its core voters to vote for the Conservative Party?
Well, that's a big question.
Yeah.
I think at the moment, where are we? We're in December. It's open. It's complicated because there are now not just 2 parties, but several other parties which are, as it were, making a claim, not for the total majority, but they're making a claim to get into the action, and get it to be valid people who have to be consulted when a government is made. We have the Scots, we have the Liberals, we have the UKIP, and all these are hopeful not to win the whole election, but to be in a position, a good bargaining position, so they can talk to whoever is going to be Prime Minister and say, look, you have to take account of us, you have to give us seats in the cabinet, so, which is normal in many countries in Europe, but abnormal here.
Yes.
And will fill people with gloom. There will be a great, there'll be a row about it, that's for sure.
Absolutely right. You've been in politics for more than 45 years, Lord Hurd. So how do you regard politics today?
Well, I think several things have changed. In my time in the House of Commons, there were many people, like my own father, who specialised in particular subjects, spoke about those subjects, were respected on those subjects, but didn't speak about anything else. And that was normal. It was some had been soldiers, some were all kinds of different professions they had had. But they spoke out of their own experience, and they therefore they were a little bit on the old side. Now the House of Commons is full of youngish people who have never done anything except politics all their life, and that leaves an impression on the public of people who are too professional as politicians. They wake up in the morning thinking of politics, they go to bed at night thinking of politics, and they marry people who are also interested in politics, and I think people are a little bit suspicious of that preoccupation with politics, which after all is not and will never be a highly popular profession.
Yes. And my last question is that, as a former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, and after the Scottish referendum, how do you foresee the future of the United Kingdom as a whole?
Well, the Scots have played a very clever hand. Mr. Salmond is a very clever politician, and he's aiming quite clearly now to be in a position, not that the Scots can win the election, because they have number 50-something seats, which is not enough. It's not a winning hand, but he can get himself into a position where he has to be consulted, he has to be involved. That's what he hopes. And he would work with the Labour Party, I imagine, but he would strike a hard bargain. It would be a tough bargain, but that's what he hopes, and it's possible that he may succeed. I don't think that he will myself, because the majority of Scots have shown that, whatever their feelings, they don't want to leave the United Kingdom. It's not a big majority, but it is a majority. And I think that will remain true.
Lord Hurd, thank you very much for giving me your time to casual politics, and I'm very grateful to you. It's a great pleasure.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.